Cat Soup is undoubtedly my #1 favorite short film of all time. For a bit of background, Cat Soup is an experimental anime made in 2001, directed by Tatsuo Sato, based on the works of manga artist Chiyomi Hashiguchi, aka Nekojiru. The film was made a couple years after the artist sadly took away her own life in 1998. The film follows Nyada, an anthropomorphic cat, as he travels through the earth and the land of the dead to save his sister's soul. The structure mainly revolves around the two going from one weird location or situation to the next. It also has a cutesy, cruel, and overall nihilistic tone throughout the runtime. The style is often experimental and artsy, which could be challenging on a first watch, but once you give this some patience and really let it sink with you, you'll soon find the absolute magic this has to offer. And to me, the film is absolutely spellbinding. First off, cutesy imagery paired with uncanny and dark themes is basically my bread and butter. It's this type of dissonance that I love seeing, especially in animations like this. The animation itself is incredibly expressive and unique. There are moments where it replicates the feeling of Dutch angles and fisheye lenses, and it makes the whole thing feel like some sort of psychedelic trip. It's very clear about its core message, which is steeped in nihilism, but the amount of set changes and colorful characters makes the whole thing feel fresh. And with every scene that passes, it gives a new angle or look into its themes of life, death, existentialism, cruelty, our relations with nature, the human condition, and surprising acts of kindness. I have seen this film about a dozen times, and with each viewing, there's a little detail or recurring motif that catches my attention and has me reevaluate the film as a whole. It's a rare instance where something like this still feels fresh after all this time. What I'm getting at is that this film has a lot of details to dissect, and even with my thorough dissection, there could potentially be some aspects that I missed. But until that happens, I am very certain that I fully understand what's going on here, and frankly, I love talking about it. If you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend you to pause this video, go watch the film, link is in description, and after you view it, let it sink in for a bit, and then come back to watch the rest of this video. But if you have seen this or just don't care, get comfy because we're in it for the long run. The opening credits perfectly set up the often disorienting mood, as well as outlining some major themes. First off, I really love the creative use of camera work following the footsteps, coupled with the sound effects and quirky music going on with it. The way the footprints circle around things and meander all around the place reflect a sense of wonder, but also feeling a bit lost. And it kind of reflects the character of Nyada in a way, and how he interacts with different characters and the environment around him. The theme of death is prominent even this early on. We see what's supposed to be a chicken enter the frame, only to be immediately eaten and killed, and things just move on. And this whole thing is like a recurring motif where something weird or something violent happens, but it's just played off like it doesn't really matter in the long run. So after those fun opening credits, we're introduced to Nyada, who is playing with a toy car in the bathtub. Already, there's something about this character design that's simple yet expressive. The wide eyes and cat mouth are very cutesy and innocent looking, which is a jarring contradiction to the actions of this particular character. It's also jarring to a lot of the events that happen, like the image of Nyada slipping into the bath and drowning, which is exactly what happens. We then cut to a rather dramatic zoom, which introduces us to his sister, Nyako, who is lying in her room, clearly very ill. The use of lighting and camera effects give us an insight into her disorienting view caused by her illness. We then catch a glimpse of a wind chime making noise, and her view shifts to a figure of Jizo. Nyata wakes up from the bathtub and wanders around the house. He tries to get his parents' attention, but they seem busy either doing dishes or sipping away at a bottle of vodka. Nyata then notices his sister wandering off in the distance with Jizo, so he runs after them. At one point, he sees 3 cats talking to each other, but they talk in what sounds like squeaking noises, and each have an inflatable plug on them. Nyata starts to pull on one until it bursts, causing one cat to deflate. Based on Nyata's body language, he is well aware of what he's done and clearly panics and runs away, but the 2 remaining cats just continue to have their conversation with each other. And that whole moment gives a taste on how surreal things can get. It also basically cements how death is mainly played off as nothing special, or at least something that's easily brushed off. And this is also the first of many instances where we see bits and pieces of Nyata's cruelty. So Nyata catches up with Nyako, with Jizo acting as her guide, a psychopomp, if you will. Nyata attempts to bring his sister home, but Jizo starts messing with Nyako's thoughts and memories, putting her in a vegetative state. Nyata and Jizo partake in a tug of war, resulting in Nyako being split in 2. Nyata runs off with his half while Jizo has the other. And before he walks away, he gives a little hint on where the missing half lies. We cut back to Nyata's dad discovering him still in the bathtub. After being pulled out, Nyata wakes up in his dad's lap having his ears cleaned. This basically confirms that all the events that happened prior were Nyata experiencing some sort of limbo. And it just so happens that Nyako was going through it at the exact same time, only Jizo happened to get to her first. It could be that Nyata's spirit was just too strong to be taken from life, which could explain the willpower he had to retrieve part of his sister's spirit. It would also explain why his parents didn't acknowledge him, not out of neglect, but because his physical body was still in that bath. Or heck, maybe there's still a sense of neglect from the family, considering that the dad just plucked him from the bathtub and instead of trying to resuscitate him, he was just cleaning his ears. And even with his own daughter dying, he still has this stupid look on his face like, I'm getting too old for this shit, let me just drink some more vodka. Oh yeah, by the way, Nyako is confirmed dead. She's dead. The doctor says it. The mom's clearly crying and upset about this. But fortunately, with half of Nyako's soul at hand, Nyata manages to resurrect her. She's alive! Well, half alive, but at the very least somewhat conscious. Kinda. Because we catch a glimpse as to where her mind is currently at, and let me tell you, it's not pretty. One thing that I really like about this scene, and a bunch of scenes that follow this, is how even though this film has some dark themes, if you really look into it, it also has a hilarious sense of offbeat humor. Specifically in this moment where after she's brought back from the dead, the doctor just goes, ah. And it's also kind of funny that this moment is basically the first time we've seen one of these cat people speak, and it wasn't hushed or came out as squeaky sounds. So after that whole ordeal, we get this striking image of a spider's web on the orange flower. Well, an orange flower. Basically, the whole thing can be seen as a metaphor as to where Nyako's mind is at, and how her missing half is literally caught in a web. The siblings are then sent to get some deep-fried bean curds. It's a fancy way of saying fried tofu. And based on their walk cycles alone, you can immediately tell everything about their character and what they're going through. Because Nyako looks like she's basically dead inside, being dragged everywhere by her younger brother, who is looking more eager and wilder than ever. They pass by a lady, human nonetheless, which sets an interesting look as to what kinds of people inhabit this world. Like, this isn't a world that's just filled with cat people, but with a vast majority of the things here being human. The two stop by a fish pond where Nyata throws what looks like a dead fish. At first, I thought it was just more cruel intentions from this sicko, but I now realize that this is somehow innocent and twisted at the same time. Like, imagine carrying this dead fish around only to chuck it into a pond as if you were expecting it to swim away. Like, I don't know whether to laugh at it or seek therapy, because what? The two begin to wander the landscape, following the sounds of a circus until, sure enough, they finally arrive. It's called Big Whale Circus, and it's not only a wild time, but it's also incredibly significant to the plot. So in the middle of the circus performance, we're introduced to this guy and his entourage of cherub cat creatures. Side note, this guy does have a name, but I'll bring it up once it's relevant. Our attention is then directed towards a young woman who is cut into multiple pieces using a giant buzzsaw. The guy then uses his godlike powers to lift the body parts into the air, swirling around at high speed until ultimately doing this. Now, this is really fascinating to me, because that whole performance wasn't really too far off from what was shown earlier when Nyata was in his limbo state. It calls into question the rule in how things in this story's universe works. It's basically this film's way of saying anything goes. And this way of thinking is the perfect excuse for things to go haywire and experimental. And it's just presented in such a strange but captivating way. For the next act, the guy is given prompts by the audience in the form of naming different objects, and the guy forms them from the clouds he spews from his mouth. I like the little detail of the clouds briefly forming the words before becoming said object. And also, one thing I must ask is, what are these cats even? We only see these cat-like characters in the form of Nyata's family, these what I'm assuming are cherubs, and only a couple spruce moments that I'm probably forgetting off the top of my head. And sure, there are a couple animals that pop up here and there, but besides that, everyone else is human. Like, could this perhaps be a hint towards cats being on a somewhat higher level of importance or power? Or was this an aesthetic choice that further cements its purposeful dissonance? We then are delivered to the climax of the circus when a giant bird-like creature enters. Several circus workers began to tighten a rope around the creature's leg, causing it to scream in pain and discomfort. But from these screams come colorful, translucent projections of beauty. The crowd roars in awe of its magnificence, prompting the workers to pull the rope tighter. Suddenly, a dark, stormy cloud begins to brew inside the creature, and the rope becomes too tight and it slices the foot clean off. The body of the creature is filled with rain clouds, filling it up with water before bursting into a great flood that wipes everyone out. I view that entire scene to be an allegory on how humans abuse nature for their own benefit. How this creature's screams of pain create such brilliance that rile up the crowd. How entertainment is valued above all else. And not just for the bird, but with the act prior. Like, this guy who has literal godlike powers and could potentially do so much with them is brought down to parlor tricks. To these people, it's like, as long as we're entertained, who cares? It's not like anything bad is going to happen to us, but once things inadvertently go south, the damage is done, and things just get a hell of a lot worse for everyone. The earth is now flooded, and Nyata and Nyako are on a boat with a pig. A mechanical butterfly flies past them, which may be vague but will later be seen as a sign that they're on the right track. It starts to rain, and Nyada uses this opportunity to use a giant leaf to help keep his sister hydrated. This particular moment showcases a revealing character trait for Nyada. He's someone who can be destructive, overly eager, have a sick sense of humor, but at the end of the day, he does deeply care for his sister. So seeing him be such a troublemaker, but then show him doing a selfless act of making sure that his sister is okay, hit something different for me. At some point, Nyada uses the restroom, which attracts the attention of fish, and in the distance notices crows start poking at a pregnant woman? Person? Thing? I don't know. But it is pregnant with 2 cat people. It starts to go off a waterfall before being catched by a pterodactyl who feeds it to her younglings. They then poop out seeds into the earth, which grow into a funky looking tree with funky looking fruit, which contains the 2 cats. At first, this seems like a totally unrelated anecdote, but I see it as a pretty nihilistic view on the human condition. It shows how these cats are literally shat out into the world after their mothers are torn to shreds. Kind of harsh if you think about it, especially if you draw parallels to real life. Just such a violent way to enter the world, sprouting something so weird looking in the process, and being placed at such a disadvantage to everything around you. We fade back to the boat, and Nyada has just been informed that a bunch of fishes were found in the bathroom. Nyada puts 2 and 2 together and does the only logical response to this information by attacking the pig. It's revealed that the pig has several markings on different parts of his body, displaying different cuts of meat. Nyada then removes a piece and cooks it up into 3 servings. 1 for himself, 1 for Nyako, and 1 to the pig. Again, this film can just get so violent and mean-spirited, and in moments like this, there's a smidge of kindness added to the mix that throws everything in a whirl. The idea that Nyada put the thought into making equal portions for everyone, including the pig that he attacked to get this meat in the first place, is just something that makes me wonder, which sicko thought of this? And that image of the pig happily eating itself cracks me up every time. And this is where we get to one of my favorite sequences in the whole film, the fish sequence. One of the fish springs to life and starts walking across the deck with one of the best walk cycles I've seen in any animation. Just then, a group of people wielding swords appear and surround the fish, and with each slice, they take a piece of the fish with them. Finally, the fish leaps into the sea, now a, skeleton of its former self. The film then switches to a musical number where we see the fish swim desperately towards what's I can only call shit based on what was shown earlier, and after a couple of seconds, we cut to the fish washed up on shore, where another cat pokes out its eye and eats it. Now, some might be thinking, well, that was random, but what does that add to it? Well, I'll tell you. First of all, the whole sequence not only steals the show, but is also pretty poetic in a way. Like, place yourself in this fish's position. You're born suddenly, flopping around in a hostile environment. Literal chunks are being taken from you for others' benefit, and then you finally make it to the calm, serene ocean, free to explore. But ultimately, the thing that you are swimming towards, the thing you're so infatuated with, is shit. It's shit. And then you die and you don't even get a respectful burial or nothing. It also adds to the idea of taking away from nature. Like, notice how both the pig and the fish have pieces of their flesh removed from them. This not only reflects our often hungry tendencies to feed off animals, but also showcases a bit of a power dynamic in living. Living only for others, whether it be fellow peers or some greater power, to take a bite out of you, only to be given a temporary moment of satisfaction that in the end signifies nothing. But instead of being presented as some big revelation, it's just presented as something natural. We are now properly introduced to God, who then grabs the earth and lifts it up, resulting in the water being drained. It's interesting how this film has both Christian and Buddhist figures. It almost feels like both figures or ideologies just happen to coexist with each other, yet minding their own business. Or maybe perhaps they're working together but running different things. Who knows? The gang is now stranded in a desert, with Nyada and Nyako using the pig's sack as leverage. Nyada starts hitting the pig with a wooden bat, cutting its lumps as food rations. But when it tastes terrible, Nyada decides to put this pig out of its misery and starts smacking it around until it collapses. And even then, it's not enough, as Nyada continues to hit it, and soon Nyako joins as well. In the middle of this beatdown, the pig bites off Nyada's hand. Nyako continues to beat up the pig as the brother says, "Big sis, my arm came off." The pig is honestly such a tragic character. Like, the guy can't catch a break. And again, it just further reflects on how far people are willing to go to take advantage of others, even when they're down and beat. And while this was slightly alluded to with that fish section where even after making a complete dish, another swordsman just can't help but take an extra swing at it, this is just a more intense version of that with how much the pig gets beaten around. Also, that shot of the two with Nyada's bleeding arm is just chef's kiss. The two come across the shack where a woman welcomes them in. She sews Nyada's arm up and it's basically good as new. They then notice the woman sewing together various animal parts to make a row of anthropomorphic dolls, like patchwork. Not to mention how the various garbage bags are full of cat pieces. So after clearly reading the room, they immediately hit the trail. If I were to say a little something, I believe that we've seen this woman earlier. While the two cats were walking in town earlier, we saw a woman with a similar hairstyle who had a bag with them, and maybe this is a hunch, except it isn't. Looking back again, she was the first human we've seen in this film, as well as the only one who wasn't at the circus. And looking back on the earlier concept of humans mistreating forces of nature for their amusement, the woman can be seen as the polar opposite of that if we relate these two scenes together. While others are tearing one another to shreds, she's here collecting those pieces and trying to stitch them back up. But despite how much she collects and how good her intentions are, she can only do so much, and looking at how many lifeless bodies there are, it feels like her efforts are in vain, yet she still keeps at it. At this point, I gotta dig deeper into this little tidbit of the film's world building that gets brushed off pretty quickly. Like, up to this point, this has happened so much that it's like a recurring bit. There are loads of moments like this where it presents an idea or anecdote to the world that these characters live in, but then moves on and at some points never brought up again. Now, if this were any other short film that had this sort of in and out style of concepts, I would normally see it as being clumsy and all over the place. But with Cat Soup, it works because it adds to the theme of letting things slip by and things not mattering in general, whether it be death, global catastrophes, or some random oddity. It manages to stay consistent in its nihilistic worldview, but instead of acting like a show-off and being like, oh yeah, we thought of this, please praise us, it's presented in a more blink it and you miss it-esque fashion. And it's this sort of confidence that I honestly fuck with. Going back to the film, the two pick up the scent of food and follow their noses until they approach a giant mansion. This is where we are introduced to the man. The man walks the two cats into the kitchen. On the way, we catch a screeching bird wearing high heels and jewelry, as well as a gallery of strange paintings. They sit at the dinner table where the man takes pleasure in tormenting another small bird tied to a string. He first splashes water on it, then sets it ablaze. The bird flies frantically for a moment until it falls to the ground, to which the sound of a cooking timer is heard. Nyada is then served a small cooked bird, which he happily wolfs down. They are then served another, even bigger cooked piece of poultry, as well as a giant candy house with hot fudge poured on top, which is all devoured. The man can be seen as a representation of some of the horrors of mankind. Just a big man with a sickening demeanor, living a life filled with luxury and gluttony. A man perfectly content with a mansion filled with unnerving pictures and acts of sadism. A man that contains a surprising amount of knowledge about the earth. I mean, that giant bird creature from earlier is a framed portrait, and yet only takes pleasure in abusing those around him for his own benefit. And he has no problem projecting that onto others because he knows that they would just devour whatever he presents to them. Just bringing back the power dynamics between man and nature, between one and the other, but all wrapped in one sinister character portrait. After that, the man puts the two cats into a pot of boiling water. He adds some chopped ingredients into the pot for taste. At this point, we're all well aware of where this is headed. The man then gets dressed up in what I can only describe as some weird S&M cosplay, wielding a giant pair of scissors. He takes a nab at Nyada but misses and falls into the pot. Nyada and Nyako barely escape, but before the man could join them, Nyada pulls off his scalp to reveal the man is a robot. He then takes the scissors and slices off the man's limbs, preventing him from escaping. Finally, the giant lid is thrown on top, and the two leave. Now this right here is the first clear indicator of cat soup, which from what I see is a higher power placing those weaker than him in a bad situation, throwing some crap in the mix to make things more interesting, and then ultimately planning on killing those poor, unfortunate souls. And yet, against all odds, those said people who are placed at a disadvantage can overcome odds and beat the system, as well as making them pay for it. But then again, even after being triumphant in the moment, what comes next? After wandering the hot desert for a good minute, Nyada begins to dig in order to find some water, but instead stumbles upon a water elephant. The two are hydrated and instantly connect with the elephant. Nyada has some fun jumping into it and swimming around, and even Nyako in her state starts sucking some water as refreshment. But because of the blazing heat, the elephant begins to dry up. After a humorous image of the elephant drinking from a puddle of water, it starts to quickly wear out and eventually give out entirely. Nyada begins to dig multiple holes to find water to keep the elephant alive, but right when he finds some, the elephant is completely evaporated. This is one of the few times I can think of where an animal is treated with a ton of kindness and support. Both the elephant and the cat seem to have some genuine content with each other. The elephant immediately helps them, and in return, Nyada does his best he can to make sure the elephant is alive and well. But again, despite good intentions, it isn't enough, and they just move on. Tragic. After a quick glimpse of strange figures roaming the sea, we cut to God cutting the world in half. One half topples over and starts rolling away. From the two's perspective, the ground starts giving way and they begin to fall. Suddenly, time stops as that half of the world is jammed in the gears of some sort of giant clock that controls time. Back to the cat's perspective, they land on an ocean, frozen in time. Nyada explores the area and finds a giant whale leaping through the waves, what looks like multiple mushroom clouds, and a frozen moment of a woman about to jump in front of a train. Nyada plucks the tear from the face and crushes it. This is where things are going to get pretty existential and trippy, even for this movie's standards. It shows that even in this snapshot in time, just mere seconds from potential disaster, not much thought is put into it. It's like this feeling of knowing that things are doomed and on the brink of collapse, but not really caring about it in the long run. In an attempt to get back that half of the world, or the bowl as I'm now going to call it, God pulls a lever to speed up the giant clock, resulting in time fast forwarding. We start seeing some quick sequences of Nyada, Nyako, and an unknown woman aging over time. The bowl travels through the gears and just misses God's grasp. Following this, God decides to reverse time, and here we see what's probably the most harrowing scene in the whole film. We see a montage of events and catastrophes in time playing in reverse. From buildings being destroyed, car crashes, acts of violence, warfare, deaths, you name it. All the while, this melancholy music plays over it. Visually, this is just really powerful to witness and really makes its presence known and sticks with you because of how long it's shown. And once the music ends, God manages to catch that bowl. We get a closer look at it and see that it is containing soup, but the bowl has an almost volcanic texture to it, and the soup itself kind of resembles lava. I mean, it was established earlier that this was a planet, but that's besides the point. God then sticks his spoon into the mixture and eats it, with droplets of soup splattering down on the camera, obscuring his face. So I've been avoiding going too much into the details of the guy in the circus because that person is in fact God, or at least a version of him. I mean, at this point it's not a secret because why else would there be a blue whale in this whole section, considering that the only time we've seen it was at the circus? And this brings up the question, did the people on Earth recruit him to pull a few tricks and then dip? Or did God himself willingly went down to be among the people only to be disappointed in what he saw? And this crushing feeling of abandonment and hopelessness is only amplified by the time rewind segment. I believe that that specific moment is saying that even if we have the power to undo the pain and suffering in the world, it would have to take unimaginable levels of power in order for that to be even remotely possible. And again, the fact that it goes on for so long just really lets it sink in on how bad and violent things have gotten and how far back this earthly pain stretches on for. Like, it even alludes to the time when reptiles were beginning to walk on land. But even if reversing things were proven possible and successful, would that really change anything? Is death and destruction the only thing that catches up with us all? And if there is a God, would he even go through the trouble of fixing things? Or has he had enough of everything and just needs to put the earth out of its misery? I mean, whatever way you look at the whole situation, it's certainly not positive. We cut back to Nyada and Nyako, who are somehow back on the boat. This time, the pig is no longer there, and it's now nighttime. This is where things get a little tricky to keep track of, because how did the two end up back on the boat? Was the whole thing a dream? I don't think so, but then again, things have been weird in general to the point where it's hard to differentiate reality and fantasy. Did they go back in time to when they were on the boat? Perhaps, but weren't they also in the world that was eaten? Did they fall somewhere else entirely and broke the laws of space and time? That's not out of the equation. Are they dead and everything they see is a lie? Also, funny enough, not too far off from what we've seen earlier. The film doesn't seem too keen on giving answers. Well, at least not in this particular moment, because it does have one definitive answer later on that makes perfect sense to me. And like this film, I'm not going to bring it up until it's relevant to the entire point. Trust me, all good things come with time. The boat then goes into a marsh filled with giant tin sculptures and mechanical creatures doing various activities. In the distance, we see the orange flower, which Nyata collects and puts it up to Nyako, which results in possibly the most wholesome moment in the entire film. Enjoy. So first off, great callback to the mechanical butterflies that were seen earlier. And also, I believe this whole section is basically a gateway into the afterlife, showing that even after death, things aren't much better off than in the land of the living. As a matter of fact, the afterlife looks so bleak and worn down compared to everything else we've seen prior. Something that can also be interpreted from this is how doing the same monotonous tasks for eternity isn't living, or in one case acts as its own sort of hell. And that whole scene of Nyako getting the life back in her eyes and patting her little brother's head is just so sweet and makes my heart melt. Just such a wholesome moment that is very well needed after everything this film puts us through. So we return back to God and now see Earth on a platter. Not a weird looking planet from earlier, but a more traditional looking Earth. God rubs his mouth with a napkin. We then see that Nyata and Nyako are back in their hometown, buying the deep fried tofu they were asked to get earlier. And then they happily walk home. Again, just such a weird recurring image of food and relating it to violence and existentialism. Because hey, as living organisms, we do need our nutrients to survive. But instead of earlier moments that are just stooped in negativity and sometimes carry a twisted sense of humor, the presentation here feels more subdued and comes across as the film saying, it is what it is. I mean, even God can get hungry, and what else is there left to eat? And finally, we come to what I believe is one of the most haunting endings ever made in any animation I've seen. We see the family around the table, Nyata seemingly recounting their adventures, an oddly wholesome moment of the family being together in one room. Nyata goes to the bathroom, and we cut back to the living room, the family all there, the TV playing a program, but then we start to see each member of the family get snuffed out, one after another, almost like a TV suddenly losing power. And sure enough, the TV cuts to static as well. Nyata returns, staring blankly into the empty room. The wind chime makes another noise, a noise we heard earlier when Jizo appeared to take Nyako into the afterlife. We zoom out from the home, now sitting in complete darkness in a vast void. And then the film just dies. Remember back at that boat scene where I was asking a lot of questions about how the two got there in the first place? Well, after seeing how things turned out, what I should have been asking is, why does it even matter? Why even go over some of the little things when it's just going to disappear and die in the end? And this is what I would like to call a purely nihilistic view. This is why different scenes come and go and how some of the aspects in its themes are brushed off. Because this is the film's way of saying how nothing matters at the end of the day. Sure, it's been proven that a lot of things can be drawn from what's being presented, and while they can be overwhelmingly negative, they're still worth dissecting. And sure, there is a lot to be said here, and a lot of the stuff I mentioned earlier, like, to me, can be such a trip whenever I ponder over those things. But really, what else is there to say at the end of the day other than we're all going to die anyways?
You see, the thing is, Brian, that God is a hateful God. Must be. Because if God is good, then why is there evil in the world? Why is there pain and hate and greed and war? Doesn't make sense. But if God is a nasty bastard, then you can say, why is there good in the world? Why is there love and hope and joy? Well, let's face it, good exists in order to be fucked up by evil. The very existence of good enables evil to flourish. Therefore, God is bad. And it doesn't matter how many past or future existences you have, because they're all going to be riddled with grief and anguish and sickness and death. You see, Brian, God doesn't love you. God despises you. So there's no hope. And mankind is just a component of the device by which the devil creates itself. You with me? You see, what I'm saying basically is you can't make an omelette without cracking a few eggs, and humanity is just a cracked egg, and the omelette stinks.
Yeah.
And as a cherry on top of all this, the fact that the film ends in static speaks volumes to me. With the final scene of having our characters suddenly vanish as the TV cuts to white noise, that final image of static transcends the film into real life. It's there to confirm that it's not only the world in Cat Soup that's doomed to end, but our world as well. And even if we waste our breath dissecting every little aspect that goes on around us, it still doesn't help us from our eventual demise. Like the characters in that final scene, we're basically looking at static, and we could just be wiped out from the earth just like that. It's an incredibly hopeless and bitter note to end the film on. And yet there is a small glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. Because this film does have an end credits, and as the credits roll by, we hear a music box version of the main theme play with a looping animation of the family at the beach. While the true ending is purely nihilistic and haunting, the credits give a more optimistic answer to the question, why does it even matter? If the static's answer is, it doesn't and never will, the credits answer is, it probably doesn't, but it's the little things and living in the moment that make all the difference. And it's this answer that makes the credits a powerful but also necessary afterthought to everything that went on. Because even if it is inevitable that everything will die and disappear forever, it's still the little things in life that make living so precious to begin with. Because life is precious. It's dumb, and at some points it's downright horrifying, but precious nonetheless. And maybe that's what Cat Soup is all about. How we're just ingredients placed in a boiling pot of water known as life, alongside other random ingredients. And while we can try our best to profile what's going on or breaking down flavor profiles or whatever, at the end of the day, it's going to be devoured and gone, but damn it if it isn't delicious as well. It's pointless, and yet it's everything at the same time, and I love it so much. And the whole thing just looks so unique and is also just so creative in its approach to different subjects. Just absolute perfection. And I hope that my deep admiration of this has been communicated properly. So yeah, that's what I have to say. As you can tell, I've definitely poured my heart out into all this. But hey, I mean, I had fun at the end of the day, and that's all that matters. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, maybe even subscribe. It means so much to me, more than you know. The past week or two has been pretty crazy for me, but in a pretty good way considering of how much attention I've been getting. So thanks again. My name is Valentino, and I am out of here.